Welcome everyone to the Cup of Coffee podcast with me, your host Tom Dillon. This has been recorded live at our weekly online meeting and broadcast around the world. Today's topic is from HMO to CMO and the mistakes made along the way with lovely Sarah Blaney. Before we start, I'd just like to say by way of a disclaimer that today is a wonderful discussion, but that nothing said here constitutes financial advice. You should always take professional advice before investing your hard-earned cash. There may be the odd unplanned swear word along the way as well. The format today is that Sarah will speak to us for a while, and then we'll take some questions from the floor. So chip in the chat or pipe up if you want to. Sarah Blaney is the co-founder of This Property Life, a podcast and networking community for people in property who want practical real world insight. I thought I said political real world insight then. I thought this doesn't sound right. That sounds like the opposite of the kind of thing you want to be doing. After 2 decades in the fast paced world of fast moving consumer goods, even sounds fast, and sales, she spent the last 10 years building a varied property portfolio that includes buy to lets, HMO, serviced accommodation, and commercial spaces. It's been a journey full of highs, lows, and big lessons, not just about property, but about what really matters. What really matters is that I appeared on Sarah's lovely podcast a few weeks ago. So if anyone's not checked that out, then do so. And we'll put a link to that, of course, with the show notes for this. And I think the goal for today is to make sure that it's better than that. Um, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who that then reflects well or badly on,
I
but hopefully
know. I don't know what that says about either of us, but
no.
we'll go. We'll give it a go, Tom.
That work for constant improvement, isn't it? And who wants to do something worse, you know? But I really enjoyed it in your podcast, and hopefully this one will go. If it goes half as well, then I think we're doing all right. How are you? What's been happening with you, and what have you got for us?
Yeah, so I am all good. I'm actually I'm getting ready to head off to Glastonbury next week. So
Wow,
I am, yeah, I'm just it's all about that. So I'm fitting this in, and actually I'm just going to go and pack the camper van straight afterwards, and start listening to all my favorite music and getting in the vibe. So yeah, I'm very
excellent,
excited about that.
excellent.
But yeah, thank you so much, Tom, for letting me come onto your podcast. I loved our conversation when we met up a few weeks ago.
Mm.
And as Tom said, I'm a co-host on this Property Life podcast. As a community, it's no gurus, no fluff. It's just real stories, real people. I would imagine it's a really similar vibe to your community, which is probably why Tom and I hit it off when he joined us as a guest. So today, so Tom said to me, "Go and talk for half an hour," and I was like, "Oh my God, on what?" He's like, "Whatever you want." I was like, "Oh, no direction, great." So I thought I'd just take you on a little bit of a journey of my last sort of 10 years. I'm going to talk you through my first proper deal. And I say proper because I have been investing in property for uh, 20 odd 25 years, but I've only been doing it in a real proper way, I think, for the last 10. So I'll take you through my first proper deal, how I scaled, how I've caught up in the noise. I've made some good moves. I've made some not so great moves. And then I'll share, just as a bit of an anecdote, what it's like to be on four in a bed, because that was a big experience, which not many people get to do. So, as Tom said, before property, I came from a corporate sales and marketing background. I did the whole university thing. I got my first in economics. I got a distinction in my master's, which is like, wahey, woohoo. And then I landed up in FMCG, which is, it was fine. I was your classic 20 something, really. I was working really hard just to fund an active social life. But along the way, I did pick up a few buy-to-lets in a very traditional manner. So I would save for my deposit, I'd get the mortgage, hope it washed its face, because I was just buying them for retirement. That was my viewpoint at the time. And if I rolled to my late 20s, my partner and I just wanted something else. So we handed in our notice, we rented out our main home, and we went traveling. 6 years later, we came back to the UK with a baby in the middle of the global financial crisis, having just left a beach in Melbourne. So we travelled the world, parts of the world, and then ended up in Melbourne and lived and worked over there, and it was amazing. So to come back to the UK with a baby in the middle of the GFC was a shock, and neither of us were thriving whatsoever. We needed to do something different, so we started a lifestyle recruitment business. And that step away from a PAYE life then led us to taking property a little bit more seriously. So about 10 years ago, we went all in on the property. We networked with the right people. We got a little bit of education, and then that's what I did, what I call my first proper deal, with some real strategy behind it. So all the previous buys had been sort of without thought, without strategy, without direction. I bought them because I thought at some point they would work out. But the first proper deal was in Liverpool. I bought a really manky 2 up, 2 down for 49,000, and it was pretty grim. It had the usual, it stank of damp, the wallpaper was falling off, there was mushrooms, the kitchen was 3 orange cupboards that were falling apart. The walls were covered in tar because the occupant was a lifetime smoker. So it was pretty grim, and I certainly would have dismissed it as a property before, when I was buying as a bit of an amateur. And all the agents had told us to stay away from Kenny, as it's affectionately known, as an area, because it was very run down. But I'd seen a strategy that was working elsewhere in the country, and all my analysis showed that it could work here. Plus, I was talking to the right people, and I knew that it was kind of working for them. So my learning number one as a full-time property investor was gather all the information from different sources, use evidence, analysis, and experience to make my decision. Because if I'd have listened to the estate agents, I would have bought in L17 postcode and not L7, as I did. And it would have been okay, it would have worked, but it wouldn't have been as good as this first deal was. So back to my little 2 up, 2 down, bought for 49k. I spent 75k converting and furnishing it into a 6-bed, 3-bath HMO for students. So this was my first proper deal. All previous deals have been a bit of a lick of paint and away you go. But this one involved taking out the inside of the building. I mean, it looked like a deserted church at one point. It was, you can't believe a small terrace could look that big from the inside. And it was a big project. It taught me an awful lot, not least what a house looks like when it's deconstructed. I think that was one of my real big insights, actually, as to how a property is built, because I think once you know all the different layers as they come back together, when things go wrong, it's a lot easier to really understand what the problems could be. But there were moments along that project where I thought, what have I done? The builder went rogue, disappeared mid-job. But I did believe in the strategy, and I knew I just had to get on. So this HMO was a bit of a standout at that moment in time, and we're going back sort of 10 years. There was brick slips on the wall. It looked like a Cafe Nero. There was cool paint jobs, the full works. And of course, the day that your HMO is finished, it is the best HMO on the market until the day after, when someone else finishes theirs, and then theirs is. But I was really proud of my first proper deal, and I wanted that really to set the standard for everything else, and it definitely worked. I mean, it revalued at 200,000, so I pulled back every single penny that I put into it. So I bought it for 49. I spent 75k on it. I put another 10k on sort of cost of money, stamp duty, legal fees, and then I revalued it with Shawbrook for 200k. And even on a 70% LTV, I pulled out 140. So I made a few thousand, and I'd funded it through pulling a little bit of equity in my own home and an angel investor. So once that refinance had gone through, my investor got paid back, and I had my pot of equity to go again. And each year that property cash flowed me between 10 and 12k, depending on the rental amounts that were in fashion at that moment. And then eventually I sold it for 265,000. So I loved that deal because I literally recycled all my money out of it in the first 6 months. It made me 10k a year before tax when I was renting it out. And when I sold it, I made another 125k before tax. So that learning number 2 was that one house taught me the power of doing things properly compared to how I had been approaching it before. And I didn't need to reinvent the wheel. I just needed a really good strategy and a good execution. Other practical things that I learned through that process is when a builder goes rogue, how you have interacted with and treated the subcontractors really matters, because we did get the house finished within the budget despite that main builder. And it was because of the relationships that we built with all of the people on site, down to the guy that leans on the broom, through to, you know, the plumber, etc. Other things: don't leave building control inspections to a builder if this is your first rodeo. Be involved so that you know that things are ticked off as they need to be. We got our EPC consultant out at the start, during, and at the end, and that house got a great EPC rating because I worked with him throughout, which obviously with the EPC changes that we're all going to be living through soon, we don't know when, but soon, that's an important thing as well. And the other practical thing, I've been using thermostats in all my HMOs for 10 years. I was a really early adopter of a thermostat, which controls the heating, and they are fantastic. And if anyone hasn't checked them out, Google thermostat and go for it. So once that first deal worked, I was kind of off. I became ever present in my investment area. I spoke to everyone: agents, business owners, council officers, people in coffee shops, really anyone who would give me the time of day. It wasn't just about being visible, it was about building trust and a network. And I became a real fixture in my patch. It wasn't to hustle, but it was to genuinely build relationships, which is kind of leading me on to number 3, because when you're talking to everybody, you get amazing information from everyone that you speak to. But my learning number 3 is, if you don't create a system to track all of that, it's information that's in your head for the time being and out of your head when something else pops in. So every time I spoke to someone, they gave me good intel, like all the houses on the right-hand side of Roma Road need to be checked for subsidence because all the drains on that side are screwed. But if I didn't write that down, I'd forget it. So with so much information, you need a system, and you need to get your information from your head out into the business so that you can call upon it when you need it. Now, I'm a real technology lover. I love a little new bit of software. I love all the AI that's coming through. It scares me, you know, shitless as well, but I do love it. So I've been creating my own CRMs and databases, and I put all of my information in there so that myself and my partner can draw on it at any time. So I use things like Airtable and more recently a really powerful CRM, email marketing thing. But you honestly don't need anything fancy. Excel can be your friend. So whatever your level of tech is, go there, but don't lose the information that you gather each time you chat to someone. And all that information, obviously, and all the network, it led to lots of deals. So I repeated that first deal with some really good C3 to C4 conversions, some with lease options, all of them with angel investor money. And that was it. I'd sort of dialed in my HMO model, different builder, but the same specs, the same systems, and it was my own little cookie cutter. So not every deal recycled all my cash out in the perfect way that first HMO had, but they were all pretty high performing. And things kind of moved quickly. The deals kept coming. The more I was in my investment area, the more the deals kept coming to me. The cash flow was really strong. The refinances were, you know, smooth-ish, as good as a refinance gets. And obviously back in the day, they were a bit easier than they are nowadays. And we rode a wave, you know, we raised money from investors, people wanted in, and we always delivered on it. And that buzz, that kind of adrenaline of turning a wreck into something really good was quite addictive. Every project felt like progress, and that confidence turned into belief. And if I'm honest, that belief turned into a bit of ego. And we started to look at bigger things. You know, the types of things you'll see. I mean, if anyone knows Liverpool, there's loads of them around, and there's all over the country. Old pubs that have been derelict for decades that, you know, house 1,000 pigeons. And you think, oh yeah, I could pick that up for a song and turn it into flats. Luckily, I held back on those because despite the increase in ego, I was still a numbers girl. And I guess all the GDV of those units, it was just not high enough to make it work. So instead, as I'm riding this wave of I can do anything, I bought a rundown B&B. And we thought about all the things that we hate when we stay in B&Bs, and we designed everything around that. So it was self-check-in, it was kind of luxury decor, but affordable. We converted all the owners' accommodation into saleable units. We took away the need for any staff. We ripped out the kitchen, made it a bedroom, and all that sort of stuff. But running a guest house, or a smart hotel, as we liked to call it, but it was kind of a guest house, it's a different beast, especially when you live 5 hours drive away and the hotel is staffless. But it did launch really well. As you can tell, I love the systems. So we put lots of great systems in and everything was really sunny. Then 2020 hit, pandemic, mandatory close for all hotels. Everyone's in lockdown, cancellations galore, health and safety, was through the roof. The process of cleaning, etc., was beyond anything I've ever seen before. The grant system for businesses of all types was an absolute nightmare, and we really wondered what we'd done wrong. We also at that time had a commercial to HMO conversion going on, and the builders were spending their bounce back loans on cars and clothes rather than going to site. And it was a really scary time for the world. And as a business owner 5 hours away from your assets, it was really scary and quite frustrating. So my lesson number 4 was that no one is an island. I became really heavily involved with the other guest house owners at that time. Initially, when I bought the place, they all ignored me. I was from down south and I'd bought up north. I'd ripped apart their business model and shown them that you didn't need staff or breakfast, and they didn't really appreciate that. But during COVID, we met on Zoom weekly and helped each other out. And network was everything. And we became really close as a group of business owners. And the knowledge and experience of all of us as a group was absolutely amazing. So that was definitely my lesson number 4, that no one is an island. And out of all that chaos came a really odd opportunity, which was 4 in a Bed. So if anyone has never watched 4 in a Bed, and I'll be honest, I hadn't, and I still haven't. It is a TV reality series where 4 B&B owners get together, visit each other's establishments and rate them on 5 different things, and then there's a winner, and essentially the producers edit it to make it look like you're all bitching about each other. So you don't apply, you're not allowed to apply, they always approach you. And we thought, kind of, why not? So I'm a bit of a natural introvert. I've really had to work at public speaking, I've had to work at networking, all of that sort of stuff, and it felt in my head that it would force me out of my comfort zone, and it was a one-time opportunity, so we went for it. Filming is surreal. Producers and crew were amazing, but the pressure to say what they want you to say is really unreal. So you're filming for 12 to 14 hours a day. You're chaperoned so that you don't build up rapport with the other B&B owners. It's really tiring. You're filmed when you're literally sitting in bed talking with your partner. It's just madness, but it was great fun. I've never ever watched the episodes and never will, but they do repeat on Channel 4 3 to 4 times a year. And every time I get a flood of bookings, I get weird DMs, and I've had death threats. So that's great. It's a real insight into the public, which frankly, I'd really rather not ever know about. But what I can tell you is that despite any clever editing, those 4 business owners all got on really well. And we are all still friends many years later. So learning number 5 for me, not very surprising, but what you see on media, and especially social media, is not reality. It's carefully designed and edited. But that TV program also led me to a direct booking for the hotel that resulted in 5 of our rooms being taken Monday to Thursday for 3 years. So the way that happened was a bloke down the pub in my investment area recognised me one night. His accent wasn't local, so I asked him why he was in town. Turns out he's a Monday to Thursday contractor working on the prisons. And the next week, he and his other contractors moved into our hotel. So TTP, which is one of my favourite sayings, talk to people, TTP, it really does work. And despite the odd death threat, 4 in a Bed really did open up opportunities for us. My lesson number 6 would be activity equals results. So if you want to buy houses, do viewings, get out there. So many people hide behind Rightmove and a laptop. Although having spoken to one of the members very briefly in the breakout room, she was traveling all over the world, and I was like, wow, you sound really amazing. Definitely not hiding behind the laptop. But the only way you're going to understand your investment area is really by being in it and information gathering, building relationships and finding those win-win situations. And then the deals and connections will come to you that way. So when Tom and I spoke on my podcast about one of my favorite deals, the deals came through exactly that: conversations and activity. My partner was up in our investment area and he was in one of the local pubs, and a guy came up to him and said, I recognise you from the TV. So you'll notice a theme that we really do make the most out of every trip to the pub that we go to. The guy said to him, have you seen those houses on X Street that are up for sale? And we hadn't. So the next day, my partner went and had a look, and there on the gable end of this row of 5 houses, which was actually a complete street, was a tiny for sale sign. And they had been listed through an agent, but they'd been put in the commercial section because it was a small portfolio purchase. There was loads of issues with the titles, and the rents were all under market value. But we took a look at them and we put a cheeky offer in, which was accepted. And we bought that portfolio actually with a mortgage. So the properties were all tenanted. They weren't gold standard, but they were definitely safe and they were okay inside. Once we bought them, we fixed all the title issues. We worked to raise the rents to a more market rate. And if anyone moved out, we refurbed and put that, at market rate. And 2 years later, when we refinanced that, we took 150k out of the deal, which equaled the deposit and all the other costs. So that money was investor funds. We gave it straight back to an investor, but we ended up with 5 houses and 25% equity. And it was only through taking opportunity when we could, the 4 in a bed opportunity, and talking to people and building rapport with people in our network area that deal came to us in the first place. So it was a really good little deal. It took no headspace. Yes, there were title issues, under market rents, but the bones of it was really good. Yeah, that's one of my most favourite deals. That deal aside, with the visibility of doing different things and doing things well came loads of pressure. So I started comparing myself to others. Everyone else looked like they were scaling faster, going bigger, and I kind of felt that I needed to do the same. I wasn't always asking, is this deal right for me? I just knew I could probably get the deal done. And so I did basement conversions and multi-unit blocks and commercial to residential, and they worked, but they were not without their own challenges. The numbers worked, my investors were always paid back, the assets were good, and ultimately I'm happy that they're in the portfolio. But the further I went up that property ladder, the bigger the headaches. So even when the deals worked, the execution got harder. It was more frustrating, more firefighting. And I think, it's getting harder and more tiresome to jump through the hoops that government lay out for small business owners. But when people are telling you how impressive what you're doing looks, you start to kind of believe in your own hype. So this is where it all starts to, it's all gone really well. I'm doing lots, I'm diversified out, it's all working, but the headspace is starting to become a little bit more painful. A mate of mine was killing it in the commercial world, and I was letting that ego take over, and I wanted in. So I bought commercial properties intending to keep them that way. One of those deals has turned into a real ball ache. So we've had planning delays, we've had tenant issues, business rate chaos. I can't tell you how much I hate the VOA. Utility nightmares. Again, as you're all property people, you will hate utility companies as much as I do. We had the work. So on paper, this wasn't a bad deal. It was a large commercial unit that was to become a CMO, so commercial multiple occupation. Big unit, used as one unit, cut down into lots of little ones. But I can honestly say that it threw everything at me, and it drained me and my partner emotionally, mentally. it literally zapped the joy out of property for me. When you're juggling multiple businesses and two of those business lines need a constant pipeline, it just becomes exhausting. And that deal made me stop and reflect, because just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And I'd stopped listening to my gut and I was playing someone else's game, I suppose. So the biggest takeaway, my learning number 7, my last learning, was to stop comparing. It's toxic. My mountain is mine, my journey is mine. And I needed to remember why I'd started. So for me, and it was really timely actually being with one of your community members in that breakout room who is literally traveling the world. For me, what I started this for was freedom, flexibility, and a business that supported my life and not one that consumed it. And it didn't happen. It was starting to become different to that. This is what I wish I'd stuck to. Be obsessed with the numbers. Don't make them up to suit the deal, but also don't talk yourself out of a deal by over egging the refurb, for example. Be obsessed with demand, especially when you enter the world of commercial or hospitality. Due diligence is everything in that area. Have multiple exits. In residential, that's kind of easy. Do you rent it out or do you sell it? But in SA or commercial, what are those exits and how quickly can you execute them? It was a big learning for me. And don't get carried away with ego. Vanilla is brilliant. For me and what I want from my life at this stage, the vanilla buy-to-let is the most beautiful thing. So align my decisions to my goals. Does the outcome of my decisions serve my goals? That's what I now ask myself all the time. And to revisit those goals regularly, because sometimes I think I can at least, throw a set of goals up because they sound good, but are they actually what I really want? And don't ignore the feel of a deal. No deal is worth peace of mind, and being busy doesn't mean successful. And if you have to talk yourself into a deal, walk away. Every time I ignored my gut, I paid for it. I have had more success than not in my property career. All my deals have worked, some more than others, but the learnings from them all have been great. I now know what I want to do and what I don't want to do. I'm not chasing volume. I'm not chasing bank balance. I'm chasing life balance, simplicity, and the freedom to choose. I want to take off in a camper van and disappear across Europe when my kids are old enough. And I don't want to worry about business lines that need pipeline anymore. So my goal now is to live richly and not just earn more. So I guess my final thing is, if you're listening to this and you feel like you're being pulled in every direction, do what I've done, is take a breath. Is this serving me? Are these goals mine? Reconnect, realign, stay in your own lane, and keep climbing your own mountain. Thank you.
Crowd goes wild. Lovely stuff. Thank you, Sarah. I've really enjoyed that. I imagine lots of other people have as well. Applause in the chat here. Not actual applause, that would be disruptive, but hands and whatnot, and plenty of questions to get through. It's exciting. So we'll crack on those in a second. I came with a couple of lines. I thought if you ever write a book or an autobiography, you could call it Sarah Blaney and My Vanilla Life. That'd be like we're getting to the point, but it's also maybe not quite the feel you would want with it. Or if that doesn't work for you, maybe Sarah Blaney and My Made Up Goals. Uh,
Yeah.
but I'm joking, of course. It's yeah, some really good stuff there. Which sounds like I'm saying most of it wasn't, which is not what I mean at all. Uh, yeah, a lot of that resonated with me, and I imagine with others. Finding a system that works, kind of being really nervous out of the gate, because everyone's nervous when they start something new. If you're not, then you've not judged the level of risk correctly, right? In my experience, and then that kind of growth stage, and then realizing, oh, hang on a minute, have we kind of you in this case overgrown or grown in a direction where, as you said yourself, is this serving me or am I serving it? Have I created a monster that I now need to feed? So just trimming the sails a little bit and making sure the boat's back onto the direction that actually serves you seems like a really obvious but good idea. Some of these ideas, when you say them out loud, are really obvious, aren't they? But when you get caught up in stuff, and of course we've all been there, it really is easy to to use another phrase, is to create yourself a job. I did that for a few years, and then thought, hang on a minute, I got into this exactly because I didn't want a normal job. So what are we doing? And by the sounds of it, that was a similar experience to what you had there.
Yeah.
Right, why don't we crack on? Because there's quite a bit come in, which is great. Julie, who I think might have been the lady you were chatting to in the breakout room, says in the chat, "Hi Tom, hi Tom, Sarah. Excited to hear Sarah's talk. The budding flight. So that she wanted to get the questions in early. She said, "What's next for you in property and in life? Are there any? Well, why don't I do one at a time? I was going to forget the previous question. What's next for you in property and in life?"
So next for us in property is really to get back to where we kind of started.
Mm.
So we are simplifying now. I'm the other side of 50, and I just want a simpler life nowadays. So we are going back to our roots. And next in life is I'm chasing Julie now. I'm going to go around the world. But yeah, she's got younger kids than I, and she's made a different decision. But my kids are settled in their schools. So once they are not requiring me quite so much, we
Mm.
are going for van life, and we're just going to bugger off and enjoy Europe.
Yeah, sounds good. Um, are there any question two from Julie? Are there any new ways you're redefining what freedom and success looks for you right now? That kind of maybe linked to what you're just talking about, I think, maybe.
Yeah, I think definitely that redefining. Like when I first started doing proper property, like a decade ago, I spent a lot of time thinking about like the vision boards and all that sort of stuff, which I'd never done before, and I'd always thought was a bit yeah, waffly and not for me because I'm a bit of a numbers person. But actually, it's probably good to actually spend the time trying to define that a little bit more, because otherwise you can get task orientated and head off somewhere. So I'm literally going to go back to myself 10 years ago and do what I did then.
There you go. So it comes full circle. But yeah, I've done that where I think lots of people have, where you look at you do your goals and they're genuine when you do them, but then maybe you lose sight of them and either forget to look at them, or a few years down the track they've changed, because that's fine. That's the point in the map you're aiming for has moved, and you're like, oh, I'm no longer heading to Hull, I'm heading to Sunderland. I wouldn't necessarily recommend either of those locations, but wherever it is you're going, I'm joking, of course. Sunderland's very nice. And to reconnect with that's, I think, really valuable, isn't it? So that's good. Um, Question from Isu. Isu asks, everyone talks about having a strategy. What's Sarah's understanding of how she develops her strategy? Maybe again, you talked to that a little bit just now.
Yeah, so I kind of work it in so if I go back to when I was doing it really correctly, Sue, my strategy would be led from my goals. So I would literally sit down and say, what are my goals? So if my goals were to build cash flow for the next few years, so that at some point, I can get out of my reliance of different other trading businesses or your PAYE job or something like that, then I would be looking to buy rental properties. So my strategy would be, okay, cash flow, where can I go and do the rent? The goal leads to the strategy leads to the area. Because I live down south, I couldn't do that there. So then I'd have to go and choose an area that I could. That for me was the northwest, specifically around Merseyside. And then that area would lead me to the property. So I think a lot of people, what they do is they see a property and they'll work backwards from it, whereas what we're supposed to do is work from our goals through to the strategy. So it can be a bit shiny penny, can't it, in property, where everyone's talking about supported living and doing this and doing that, and you kind of go, oh, I want a piece of that. And I've learned the hard way that actually you've just got to keep to what your goals were in the first place, and that will lead you to your strategy.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. That links into a question that Ed's asking, which I wanted to make sure we're also being useful. I'm sure, hopefully, we are, but especially useful for maybe people just starting out. Ed's not starting out, but he's quite experienced. But he says, what set of questions do you ask yourself if an opportunity is worth your time for someone that is just starting out, or maybe another way of putting that is. You said you're a numbers person, and we don't need, and I'm not asking for your list of numbers, but what kind of things were you looking at numbers wise if it was numbers that were driving your decisions?
So The numbers that I would always look at if I'm doing like a residential project is I'd always start with the end in mind. So the done up value of that property once I've done what I want to do to it. And a lot of my stuff was HMOs. A lot of them were 5+, so they were C4 HMOs. And in certain areas, I knew I could get commercial valuations on that as well. So, but then again, do I want a commercial valuation? Because sometimes if you need to think about an exit on an HMO, for example, having a really high commercial valuation in an area that isn't known for its sales yet can lead you to not being able to get rid of that for quite a long time. So there is a careful balance between all of that. But ultimately, I'm looking at the done up value, I'm looking at the rents, and I'm looking at the refurb. Those three things will tell me whether the deal is any good or not. And I'm looking at it from Rightmove and all of the information that's on the internet for me. But then I'm going around and I'm talking to letting agents, different ones. I'm talking to estate agents. I'm talking to, more than one builder to get my quotes. So I'm gathering the same piece of information from 3 or 4 different places. My job is obviously to bring it all together and make sure that I'm not going to lie to myself about the deal. And I literally put everything through my spreadsheet, and it either spits out a number that looks good or it doesn't, and it means I can compare every single deal. But ultimately, it is rent, done up value, cost of money as well, obviously, and then the refurb.
Yeah, I'd back that up by saying, and this is my opinion, not Sarah's, but that if you're out there doing property deals of more or less any type, of more or less any size, and you're not looking quite a lot of numbers, then you're a loon. Because if you're doing it based on feel, which is, by the way, probably what my dad used to do, but the numbers were very different when he was buying houses for 200 quid. So you had a bit more wriggle room. But these days, you want to have make sure you're looking at a spreadsheet at very least. And if you're not, speak to an experienced person who will hopefully point you in the right direction. I've just scrolled down the chat, and my favourite comment today comes from Don, who just says, "Wow." That's the kind of feedback we like, Don. First of all, positive. There's no need for any criticism or negativity in there. Second of all, it's not questions. We can move straight through it. Third of all, a little bit of buzz. I like it. Well done to Don. Thanks for getting involved. And another question from Ed, which is kind of linked to this or linked to your choices, but I wanted to cheat and use my host's privilege to ask a question of my own, which is I've got a project at the minute. It's in fact, I may have even been the one I talked a little bit about on your fine podcast, and at the end of it, I'm going to end up with essentially one of the flats, probably. And I've got to decide whether to do service accommodation with it, which I think will work nicely, or vanilla single let. Now, based on what you said just now, maybe the way you'd be looking at that is maybe we'll keep it simple and keep it vanilla and rent it out that way. But you also said when you were looking at the service accommodation things or doing it, now I'm going to misquote you here, but you said you need to be obsessed with the demand. Was that, have I got
Demand,
that? Yeah.
demand, yeah, yeah.
And so how do I'm not obsessed with the demand, and clearly I need to be. How do I get more obsessed with the demand and basically decide which way to go with this project?
So it's not too different to how you'd look at rental demand. So you'd look at rental demand by going on to Rightmove and looking to see how many properties are up for rent, what they're going for, and how many are subject to let and all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of the same. We go on to the online travel agents, the OTAs, which are Booking.com, Expedia, and Airbnb in the main. Booking.com being by far the leader of the pack,
Yeah.
and you start looking at the same type of properties in the same areas and forward going through to see, well, what's been sold out. You can tell the availability from these portals. You can go on and buy AirDNA data. You can buy Price Labs data. It's kind of scraping from those OTAs to give you information. And then I'd be talking to every single serviced accommodation host out there. So a lot like residential property investing, there is enough for everybody. And I just don't believe that we're competition to each other because we can't buy everything. So a serviced accommodation host, much like I found with my B&B owners, they all want to help each other out. So they will tell you when the low seasons are, They'll tell you, what type of bookings they're getting, whether it's leisure, whether it's business, whether it's contractors. And then I'd also be talking to the professional managing agents out there, and I'd price that deal in to see whether it works with those professional managing agents. Because if you can accommodate their 20% management charge, then that deal is definitely worth doing. And also having service accommodation, if you've got one unit, it's a lot harder. If you've got 5 units within, a geographical area that is close, you can swap people round, you can hire your linen in. It makes it a lot easier just to operate the actual unit because you've got scale. You've got a cleaner that can go from one to another. It just works better. So it comes down to that strategy again. If service accommodation is something that you want to go and do, having one is much more of a ball ache than having 5.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I
Unless you
find
can do it with a management agent.
I find the same's true with like billions of pounds. Like having £5 billion is miles better than having just £1 billion, isn't it? But I set your point on board. It's a slightly different opinion. Excellent, excellent stuff. I'll definitely look into that, and hopefully anyone listening to accommodate, listening who's like me, sort of dipping their toes in service accommodation, will do the same. Um, Edward asks, so I was saying, Ed was asked another question, which was, when you're living in Melbourne, you came back. What were the things that you appreciated about UK property that made you decide to invest in the UK rather than other parts of the world? Maybe it's because you were living here and you knew things about it, and I think you said you had a baby at that point, so maybe it was those kind of things. But are there any other reasons you've not invested in, Peru or Antarctica just yet?
So the model that I'm kind of using that hopefully came out when I was talking was that I'll buy something generally with cash. So yes, I have bought with a mortgage a couple of times, but generally I'm buying it with cash, someone else's or my own, and then refurbing it, and I'm getting something bigger and better out of it so that when I refinance, I'm pulling a bit more money out of that and that I can go off with that pot and recycle it. You can't do that everywhere in the world. So places you can do it are New Zealand, Canada, and I don't know every part of the world at all, but I know you can do it in New Zealand, Canada. You can do it to an extent in Australia, and you can definitely do it in the UK. We have a lot of overseas investors in the UK because our regulations are such that they can do it as well. So we have lots of Asian investors, we have lots of European investors that come and do what we're all doing in the UK. And that's because our market allows it. Whereas other places, Germany, Singapore, there's limits on how much you can own, and there's limits on all sorts of stuff. We don't have that, which is why the UK is attractive to everyone as a property investor. One thing I do say, Ed, is that what I'd wished I'd done is kept my property in Australia, but we sold it because, I was pregnant. We sold the Porsche 911 as well. We regret that. And we regret selling the properties in Australia. I wish I'd kept hold of them because literally about a year and a half later, like everywhere in the world, Australia went and it would have been a really wonderful thing. But, hindsight is great.
But for anyone listening to the podcast, is the noise for increased. Uh, just for
Yes.
just for clarity there. Australia really went bananas, didn't it? I've got friends. I spent time in Japan, and I've got friends here who've got Australian properties, and they're not quite quitting their jobs and going down the bars, but they're not far off it because I think the average Australian property. In fact, stop listening to this podcast and go and find an Australian property podcast and get busy because the average Australian property, I think, just passed $1 million Australian dollars, which is nuts. I think we've got a sort of housing crisis in the UK. From what I understand it, I'm not an expert. It's nothing compared to Australia. Excellent questions from Ed. We got a lovely comment from Dan in the sort of Don vein. Don vein. Dan simply says, let me find it. Good experience present, which I think means, lovely, a great talk, I think is what she's driving at there. So thanks very much, Dan, for chipping in. Question from Elaine, which again links to investors. You're talking about investors often being a cash buyer. Elaine says, how does, quite simple, I quite like this, how does Sarah find investors? quite hard to find someone to give you 100 grand of their hard-earned cash. What are your golden nuggets on that topic?
So literally everyone is an angel investor until they prove otherwise.
Hmm.
That's my thought on it. So I think we as a nation can make a lot of. We're a bit weird about money. Maybe other nations are as well. I don't know. But I know that we don't like talking about money. I have weird relationships with it. I do as well. A lot of it stems from just upbringing and all that sort of stuff. But there are an awful lot of people who you would assume not to have money, but what you don't realize is that Auntie Beryl died and left them whatever, and it's sitting in the bank, and they're scared of it and they don't know what to do with it. So don't assume anything about anyone. Obviously, there's an awful lot of rules around high net worth individuals and all of that. It's not my place to be going into any of that detail, but I do know that detail. But you don't need to find someone with 100K. You can find 10 people with 10K each. So some people would rather find 10 people with 10K each, because if one angel investor's situation changes, it's a lot easier to swap them out for another 10K person than it is to swap out one guy with 100K. But how do I find them? I literally just tell people what I do, and it starts a conversation.
Pub,
TP.
presumably, is it mostly?
Say again.
Down the pub, is it mostly, I think?
You know me. So there's loads of people that do it through social media. I'm not a social media person. Like, I use it for the podcast. I don't put I just, and there's nothing against it. I'm just not very good at it. So lots of people use social media to get their angel investors. I personally don't, but I do it in real life through talking to people.
Uh, Super stuff. Ed's got to go. See you later, Ed. Cheers. Thanks for coming. Meanwhile, Isa asks, can Sarah talk a bit about CMO and her experience? The answer to that, Isa, is no, she can't. Two reasons. One is we're out of time, and two is we've got to have a reason to invite her back in about a year's time, and so we've got to have something to hook into. Otherwise, there's no reason to come back on. So we're gonna have to, for those two reasons, shelve it. And instead bring it all to a thudding close. I'd like to say thank you for everyone who's attended today. And of course, a special thanks to all those listening and watching, and our fabulous speaker, Sarah Blaney.